Welcome to Biker Business. Today we're looking at 7 Honda motorcycles dealers are trying to dump ASAP. And trust me, some of these bikes might surprise you. The Honda DN01 is one of those bikes that makes you scratch your head. What is it exactly? It's not quite a cruiser, not really a sport bike, and it has automatic transmission, which isn't something most riders look for in a motorcycle. It came with a 680cc V-twin engine, putting out around 61 horsepower. That's not bad, but here's the problem. It's heavy, weighing over 595 pounds, and the automatic transmission made it feel sluggish compared to traditional manual bikes. The DN01 also had a futuristic design with smooth, flowing lines and a low-slung profile. Some people liked the unique look, but most found it awkward and not very practical. The riding position was another issue. Low seat height and forward controls made it comfortable for cruising, but not for longer rides. Dealers struggled to sell it because the price tag was just too high for what it offered. When it first came out, it was priced around $15,000, which was way more than people were willing to pay for an automatic motorcycle. Even today, used models aren't moving quickly. Riders who want an automatic bike usually go for scooters or something smaller and cheaper, not a bulky motorcycle with a confusing identity. And then there's the tech. The human-friendly transmission, HFT, which was Honda's term for their automatic system, was advanced but also complicated. If something went wrong, it wasn't cheap to fix, and that scared off a lot of buyers. So dealers have a tough time moving these off the lot. They appeal to a very specific type of rider, and that's a small market. Next up, we have the Honda NM4, another futuristic-looking bike that just didn't connect with riders. This one looked straight out of a sci-fi movie with its angular bodywork, sharp edges, and an aggressive front end. It had an automatic dual-clutch transmission, DCT, which was supposed to make riding easier and more fun, but just like the DN01, that ended up working against it. The NM4 came with a 745cc parallel twin engine producing about 54 horsepower. It wasn't a bad engine, but it wasn't exciting either. Riders who tried it often said it felt underpowered, especially for a bike that looked like it should be fast and aggressive. One of the biggest complaints was the riding position. The seat was wide and low, which made it comfortable at first, but over time, it became awkward. The foot-forward position didn't help much either. It was fine for cruising around town, but not great for long rides or twisty roads. Another issue? The storage. Honda tried to make it practical by adding compartments and storage spaces, but they weren't big enough to carry much. If you wanted to take a trip, you'd need extra luggage, which kind of defeated the purpose of the bike's sleek design. The price tag was another sticking point. At around $11,000, riders expected a bike that delivered more power and versatility, but the NM4 ended up being more of a style statement than a practical ride, and that didn't sit well with most buyers. Because of all this, dealers are left with NM4s that just won't sell. It's a niche bike, and finding the right buyer is tough. Most riders prefer traditional cruisers or sport bikes that deliver better performance and comfort. Now, don't get it wrong. The Honda Goldwing is a legendary touring bike. It's been around for decades and has a solid reputation. But here's the catch. Older Goldwing models are becoming harder and harder to sell. Why? Well, one reason is size. Goldwings are big, heavy machines designed for long-distance touring. Older models, especially those from the early 2000s, weigh over 900 pounds and can be a challenge to handle, especially for newer riders. They're packed with features like radios, heated seats, and navigation systems, but compared to today's bikes, those features feel outdated. Another problem is maintenance. Older Goldwings need regular servicing, and parts can be expensive. Riders who buy them used often face repair bills they weren't expecting. Plus, newer touring bikes from competitors are lighter, easier to ride, and offer better fuel efficiency. The price of older models isn't exactly cheap either. Some dealers still have them listed at high prices, hoping to find a buyer who values their classic status. But most riders would rather spend that money on a newer bike with modern tech. Because of all these factors, dealers struggle to move older Goldwings off their inventory. They appeal to a specific group, older riders who love the classic touring experience, but that market is shrinking. The Honda NT1100 is another bike that dealers can't seem to sell fast enough. It was meant to be a great touring option, offering comfort and practicality, but didn't quite catch on. One of the biggest reasons? It's not exciting. The NT1100 uses the same 1084cc parallel twin engine found in the Africa Twin, which puts out around 100 horsepower. That sounds good on paper, but in reality it feels underwhelming for a touring bike. Riders expected something with more punch, and the NT1100 just didn't deliver. The design was also a bit too plain. While it's a well-built bike, it doesn't have the visual appeal that some riders look for. It's practical, sure, but not the kind of bike that turns heads or gets people excited to ride. Another challenge is competition. The touring market is packed with options like the Yamaha Tracer 9 GT and BMW R1250 RT, which offer more advanced features and better performance at similar prices. Riders comparing their options often found the NT1100 lacking in terms of tech and riding experience. And then there's the weight. The NT1100 comes in at around 530 pounds, which isn't too bad for a touring bike, but it can feel heavy when fully loaded with luggage and gear. That made it less appealing for riders who wanted something agile and easy to handle on long trips. Because of all of this, dealers find it hard to sell the NT1100. It's a solid bike, but it's just not exciting enough to stand out in the crowded touring market. Riders want more than just reliability. They want a bike that makes them feel something, and the NT1100 struggles to do that. Now, let's talk about the Honda CRF 300L. It's a dual sport bike that looks like it should be a hit, right? It's lightweight, affordable, and great for both on-road and off-road riding. But here's the problem. Dealers are having a tough time getting them off the showroom floor. One reason is the performance. The CRF 300L comes with a 286cc single-cylinder engine that makes around 27 horsepower. That might sound okay for a beginner bike, but once you hit the highway, it struggles to keep up. Riders who want to tackle off-road trails love its lightweight frame and suspension, but when it comes to longer rides or higher speeds, it starts to feel underpowered. And then there's the competition. Other brands like Yamaha with the WR250R or even KTM's off-road models offer more power and better suspension, making them more attractive options for serious riders. The CRF 300L ends up feeling like an in-between bike, not quite good enough for hardcore trail riding and not comfortable enough for daily commutes. The price also makes things tricky. While it's one of the cheaper dual sport options, some riders feel they're better off saving a little more and getting a bike with better performance and features. Dealers have to work hard to convince buyers that the CRF 300L is the right choice, but most of them end up going for something with a little more power or versatility. And let's not forget the seat height. Even though it's relatively low compared to bigger dirt bikes, it's still a challenge for shorter riders. Some people walk into a dealership excited to try it, only to realize it's taller than they expected. That alone can turn potential buyers away. All of this makes the CRF 300L a tough sell for dealers. It's a solid bike, but in a crowded market with better options, it often gets overlooked. Next up is the Honda Navi, and this one is really struggling. Honda introduced it as a fun, affordable mini bike, and it seemed like a great idea. It's cheap, light, and easy to ride with a small 109cc engine that puts out about 8 horsepower. It's automatic too, which makes it beginner-friendly. But here's the problem. People just aren't buying it. One of the biggest reasons is its size. It's tiny, and while that's great for city riding, it's not practical for much else. If you're taller, the Navi feels cramped, and there's not much space for carrying things. Even though it's designed to be fun, a lot of people quickly realize they need something bigger and more capable. Another issue is the engine. While it's great for short trips, it struggles on hills and in traffic. Riders who expect a little more power are disappointed when they realize the Navi tops out at around 50 miles an hour. If you live in a place with higher speed limits, it's just not enough. Dealers are also facing a challenge with competition. For a little more money, riders can get a scooter with better storage, comfort, and performance. Even within Honda's own lineup, bikes like the Grom or Ruckus offer more personality and practical use. The Navi feels stuck in between, and that's why it's not moving off showroom floors. And then there's the look. Some people find the Navi styling a bit too quirky, and they're not sure if they should treat it as a scooter or a mini motorcycle. That confusion makes it harder to sell because it doesn't fit clearly into one category. Even though it's budget-friendly, the Navi just hasn't found its audience in many areas. Dealers are stuck with them, trying to push discounts and promotions, but it's still a tough sell. At the top of the list, we have the Honda VFR 1200F. When it first came out, it looked like it was going to be a big deal. It had a powerful 1237cc V4 engine that produced around 170 horsepower, and it came with advanced tech like the dual clutch transmission, DCT. On paper, it sounded like the perfect sport touring bike, but in reality, it didn't live up to expectations. One big issue was the weight. At over 600 pounds, it felt too heavy for a sport bike and too sporty for a touring bike. Riders who wanted a touring bike often went for something more comfortable, like the Goldwing, and those who wanted a sportier ride found it too bulky. The fuel range was another letdown. Even though it had a big engine, the fuel tank was relatively small, and that meant frequent stops on long rides. For a bike that was supposed to be built for sport touring, that was a major drawback. Another reason it didn't sell well was the price. When it was new, it cost around $16,000, which put it in competition with more popular bikes from brands like BMW and Yamaha. Many riders felt they could get better value elsewhere, and they did. Over time, dealers found themselves stuck with VFR 1200Fs that just wouldn't sell. Even now, used models can be found sitting in dealerships, waiting for the right buyer to come along. The problem is, most riders are looking for either a full-on touring bike or a lighter sport bike, and the VFR 1200F doesn't fit neatly into either category. The technology was also a bit too advanced for its time. The DCT was new when the bike came out, and while it was innovative, many riders were hesitant to trust an automatic transmission on a big sport bike. Some preferred a traditional manual setup that pushed them away from the VFR 1200F. All of these factors make the VFR 1200F a tough bike for dealers to sell. It's powerful, well-built, and reliable, but it just doesn't connect with enough riders to make it a popular choice. So there you have it. 7 Honda motorcycles dealers are trying to dump ASAP.